You think that when you die you go to heaven? You come to us. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen. This week we are doing another movie review. This is Phantasm II. The Ball is Back. Released in 1988. Written and directed by Don Coscarelli, who you really have to give all the credit in the world for this entire franchise, really. It's all his vision, you know. I'll say it again, the original film from 1979, I feel, is just a horror classic. It's one of the most original and unique horror films ever made. It had a little bit of sci-fi in there as well. Just such a unique film. And the film Phantasm II, the sequel, is a lot of fun. I kind of compare it in a way to like the way the Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead was, to Evil Dead 2. I feel like Phantasm II like amps up the action and the violence, and there's definitely a lot more blood and gore, and a lot more one-liners for the tall man, you know. It's a lot more fun, I would say, than the original, where I feel the original had more of a serious tone. It was like serious horror, you know. With this one, it just seems a lot more fun and a lot more action and a lot more blood and gore. There's some awesome gore effects in this movie. Definitely, this movie brings the blood and the gore big time. So the film starts off with a scene from the ending of the original 1979 classic. You know, when Reggie and Mike are sitting there, you know, contemplating what the hell just happened, and then Mike goes up to his room and he looks in the mirror and he sees the tall man. He's like, "Boy," and then the Jawa monster things like smash through the window and grab his body. And then right there, Phantasm II picks up. So kind of similar to the way the original Halloween 2 continued directly the moment that the original Halloween ended. That's what Phantasm 2 tries to do. And you see Reggie going upstairs, and he still has the checkered shirt on, you know. But it's so noticeable, it's so obvious once you see him from that point that he looks 10 years older. So it doesn't quite work as well as Halloween 2 pulled that off, because that was only 3 years difference. So it is noticeable, but it's still cool. I love that they did that. And of course you see the tall man in that scene as well, and he looks another 10 years older than he did in the first film, but no matter, because they pull it off pretty well, I think. Even though it's noticeable, it doesn't really take me out of the film at all. Because you're definitely still invested in these characters. So, really from there it picks up, and Reggie grabs Mike, young Mike, which we don't see his face, and there's a reason for that, because it's a different actor in this film. And that's one issue people had a lot of problems with. The fact that they replaced the actor who played Mike in this film. It's played by James LeGros in Phantasm II, where the original was A. Michael Baldwin. And they actually rectified that later in the series. They brought Michael Baldwin back to the franchise. But at any rate, I didn't have any issue with it, because the film from there jumps to 10 years later, and it makes sense, because this guy, I could believe, could be that same kid. You know, he has the long brown hair, and you know, he looks enough like him where it didn't take me out of the movie, you know. Because people change a lot from when you're a kid to 10 years later, and now you're an adult, you know. I bought it, you know, and I think he does a fine job, you know. I have no idea why they use a different actor, but who knows, you know. At least they did bring him back to the series. So yeah, what happens in that beginning too as well is Reggie and Mike just blow the whole house up, but of course the tall man escapes and we see him outside, you know, with a fire behind him, and he's just chilling. He walks into his hearse and takes off, you know. And then, bam, 10 years later, we meet Mike as an adult. And he happens to be in an insane asylum, you know. And apparently he's been doing real well, you know. He is recovering. And they decide to release him on good behavior and the fact they feel he's fully recovered. You know, even though he's kind of BSing in the scene, he's telling them what they want him to hear, you know. Because he really does believe these things happened back in the original film. He believes all these events happen and nothing has happened to change his mind. He's just like telling them what they want to hear. But right away, as soon as Mike gets out of the insane asylum, he goes right to the cemetery where it all took place, and he digs up all the graves. Some people might think he's a friggin' lunatic, but he digs up all the graves, and there's no bodies in any of them, you know. So we know the tall man has been there and robbed all the graves and wants to make all these people into his minions, into these little, like I said, Jawa-looking things. They got the little hoods and the little people, you know. He, like, crushes them down, I guess, and turns them into his little zombie minions. And we see them at the beginning as well, as we saw in the original film, the little Jawa monsters, and they attack Reggie. Yeah, so at that point he runs into Reggie again, and Reggie doesn't quite believe him. He believes everything that happened in the original was all made up. He made it all up in his mind, you know, Mike. But then he's like, you know, why are all these graves empty, you know? He's like, I'm going after him. And then when they're on the way back to Reggie's house, he gets like a premonition. And the premonition is that the tall man has gotten to Reggie's family. And that's exactly what happens. The tall man got to his family and blew up his whole house with his family in there, you know, and he freaks out. So Mike knew what was going to happen. And that's when Reggie is reeled in. He's like, okay, I'm going to get him, you know. And we also meet this new girl, Liz, who apparently is like a psychic, has a psychic bond with this guy, Mike. Why, I don't know, where this comes from. It's like they kind of made that up for this movie. It doesn't quite add up. But it does if you think about it, because I thought that girl, Liz, was the same character from the original movie that was the fortune teller's granddaughter that Mike went to visit. If you look at her as being that character, it makes more sense, but I don't know if they had that planned or what. If that's not that girl, then this doesn't quite make that much sense. But at any rate, she's afraid that the tall man is going to get her grandfather when he dies, and that the tall man's going to take him away and turn him into a zombie, one of his minions. And that is the plan that tall man has, you know. And this girl Liz visits Mike in the dreams, you know, and Mike sees her in his dreams. So they have kind of a psychic link. And so Reggie and Mike go off to try and find the tall man. Apparently the tall man is going from place to place, town to town, like tearing up and destroying all these towns, and they're leaving nothing but ashes in the wake, you know, people dead everywhere, you know. But eventually they get to Perigru, Oregon, and that's where Liz is, and that's where they're having the funeral for her grandfather. And bam, we find that the tall man is there waiting for the body to exhume the body and make her grandfather one of his slaves, his zombie slaves. So once that happens, Reggie and Mike get there to save the day, and they decide to break into a hardware store, and he's like, let's go shopping. And they amp up, they grab all the weapons. You see Reggie with a bullet vest like Rambo and shit. and he comes up with this quadruple shotgun with sawed off, and it looks sick, man. Yeah, quadruple barrel shotgun sawed off. And Michael's weapon of choice is the flamethrower, so you know we're gonna get some great, awesome action, and we definitely do. We get some awesome lines from the tall man, and they have a big clash, big epic final conclusion and climax, and it's awesome. It's so much fun, and this film definitely has a lot of the elements of the original film, like, you know, we go back to the mortuary, and we see those funky sphere things that have the little spears that come out and attack people and drill a hole in their brain, and the blood comes out of the back, and we see a lot of nice scenes like that in this film. I always thought that was such a cool visual, like in a perfect setting for a horror movie, in that mortuary, and when you see the spheres going down the hallway and the cool camera work and everything. And of course the tall man is a great visual. And Angus Scrimm does a fantastic job in this movie. He's every bit as good as he was in the original. Just an awesome character, and definitely an iconic role. And rest in peace, Angus Scrimm. You're awesome. You were so great in this franchise. So, love you, man. So definitely great action from the tall man, some incredible gore effects. There's this one scene involving the spear things, and one of the tall man's like morticians, henchmen, that works for the tall man, tries to go after Liz, and one of the spheres gets him and like pins his hand to the door, you know, and then another one comes and it goes right through the dude's chest, and the blood's pouring everywhere. And it goes, and it comes out like his face, and you see the spikes come out of the dude's face. It's really sick, man. And you see it still drilling, slowly coming out of his face. Oh, awesome gore effects, whoever did that. Really cool. So yeah, this is such a fun sequel. Like I said, it amps up the action. The blood and gore is fantastic. Love the performances, even though they changed the actor who played Michael. I still think he does a solid job. It does have a little bit more schlock value. It does feel a little more low budget. I don't know what the budget was, or if it was more than the original. I don't know. But somehow the original seemed like it had more of that dark gothic quality to it. It didn't look like cheaper. This movie looks a little bit cheaper at times. But at any rate, that's just a nitpick, you know. The film is so much fun, and it's very faithful to the original film, and it's got a lot of the elements that made the original film great from 1979. So if you love the original classic, I see no reason why you would not love the sequel. So definitely I highly recommend Phantasm II. It's an absolute blast. So that's my take on Phantasm II. The ball is back. Now, believe it or not, I have not seen Phantasm 3 or 4, or 5 for that matter, which was the last film to feature Angus Scrimm, and was, I believe, the final film in the franchise. So I haven't seen 3, 4, or 5 yet, so I need to rectify that, guys. So once I do, I'll get back to you guys with a review of those films. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.